Since 1934, Iowa's farmers have turned to the Iowa Farm Bureau spokesman as their trusted news source. Now, the Spokesman Speaks. Listen in and hear from leading experts on topics important to farmers and agriculture. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Caitlin Lamb, and today, as we wrap up Iowa Farm Bureau's annual meeting in Des Moines, we're giving you part 3 of a special 3-part series featuring the 2023 winners of Iowa Farm Bureau's Young Farmer Leadership Award. We've released episodes featuring winners Josh Bierbaum and Matthew Burt. If you missed those, go back and take a listen. And while you're there, subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks in your favorite podcast app. Today, you'll hear from Ryan Gibbs, a farmer who loves to chat about all things conservation and who describes all the changes he's made to his land as what makes farming fun. We're out here on Ryan Gibbs' farm in Delaware County. Ryan is one of 3 of our Young Farmer Leadership Award winners. And Ryan, you gave us a tour of your family farm here. You have a lot going on. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, we live in eastern Iowa here, Delaware County, just north of Hopkitten. We run a livestock and grain operation here. We sell cover crop seed, got feeder cattle, we got a hog barn, we raise some pasture-raised pigs, corn, soybeans, cereal rye, buckwheat. I'm a dealer with Iowa Cover Crop, selling and applying cover crop seed.
And along with being busy on the farm, you also have some young kids who keep you busy too. Can you tell us about your family?
Yeah, married to my wife, Christy. We got 2 children. Kendrick is 3, and my daughter, Colette, is just over a year old. 2 kids keep me busy, running around and having fun on the farm.
Now, what generation of farmer are you?
3rd generation farmer. My parents bought this farm in 88. And then I've been farming it since 2009, 2010, right in there.
Okay. So then you start kind of taking over the family farm and you're making all of these changes in land practices. What was your dad's reaction and your community's reaction to that?
So I started renting this ground. I mean, we were full anhydrous, fall tillage, at least one pass in the spring tillage, no cover crops. Mostly corn on corn, no beans. And then, I decided to change some stuff up. I met Lauren Steinloggy, learned from him, met a neighbor who had some really nice looking cover crops doing conservation practices. And I'm like, this just seems like a lot more fun. And we had some erosion on the farm that we need to get rid of. And I made some changes. And, originally my dad was like, I don't know about this. And, that first fall in the combine and the yields were the same as the previous year, only we did all the tillage. And we were able to cut out all the tillage and our yields were the same. It's like, okay, now we're going to amp up our game. We're going to start throwing some cover crops in there. So we started transitioning the ground over 2 years into all cover crops and no-till. And then that led to, let's plant some rye too, and then some buckwheat. And so now we got, all these crops growing. I originally had some pushback on it. They were pretty unknowing if it was going to work. And I kind of had the mindset like, I got to make this work. I mean, we got rent payments to make. We got people that got to get paid. It was definitely a learning experience, and it makes farming fun. And since then, we've just expanded upon that. And people used to think I was crazy with what I was doing. If the neighbors weren't talking about what I'm doing, then I'm not trying hard enough. I mean, I had people driving by while I was roller crimping my rye and wheat and crimson clover and hairy vetch, everything that was growing. There's like 9 different species, It was like 3-4 foot tall, and people are driving by thinking, what the heck is he doing, Yeah, it keeps the neighborhood talking, but, some people really thought I was crazy, and now they're looking at it like, hey, maybe he's doing something that's kind of right, I guess. When I first started farming, the first 3 years, it flooded every year. I had corn up to the tassel in water. Like the ears were submerged in water. 3 years in a row, my first 3 years. That was before we started doing all the conservation practices. And I'm noticing farmers upstream from me doing a lot more conservation practices in the last 3 to 5 years, really. And now I look at it, we get a 4-inch rain and the creek might go up, but it's not coming out of the banks like it used to. And even when they're getting heavier rains than that north of me, up the river, we're just not seeing the amount of flooding that we had, 10 years ago. Them first couple of years was flooding every year. And we're just not seeing as much of that, which is great. That means our water's infiltrating like it's supposed to.
I love how you talk about that you're okay with being the talk of the neighborhood, because I've heard opposite stories before where someone has tried cover crops and then everyone's talking about them at the local coffee shop and they went out and actually tilled it under just because they didn't want people talking about what they were doing. And in your application, you talked about how fun it is to cut this 2 to 3 foot tall cereal rye. And you mentioned things like the fresh aromas, the pheasants scattering, the butterflies, quote unquote, the beauty of life. And for a moment, I was like, dang, Ryan, am I reading an application or some poetry here? But it sounds like this really means a lot to you. Can you talk about just kind of the why behind all the conservation that you're doing?
This year and last year was kind of a lot of fun because we started planting into some really tall stuff. And while we're doing it, we're kicking out 3, 4, 5 pheasants every 20 minutes. There's birds flying throughout the field, butterflies everywhere. And my son even said that when he's riding the tractor. He says, Dad, there's butterflies everywhere. It's kind of neat seeing that. There's a lot of life out there while you're planting. And this year we even did some where we terminated the cover crop and we roller crimped it 48 hours later and planted right behind the roller crimper with the tractor. So that was a new experience on some acres too. So yeah, it's just planting green. There's not the dust. There's life out there. And when there's life above ground, I feel there's a lot of life below ground, making that biology work and that soil work and making it healthier. So it just makes farming fun.
When you talk about life above and below ground, your County Farm Bureau president said in her recommendation letter for this award, I've never met anyone who's more excited about earthworms than Ryan. And you and I both know Mitchell Hora, so we're like, we'll see who's most excited. But you've also spoke at one of his big soil health conferences. So is it a passion of yours to also share the story of conservation with other farmers?
Yes, I love sharing my story. I'm a friend of Mitchell's. Mitchell's a good friend of mine, great guy. And I mean, Mitchell is very jacked up about earthworms and he loves earthworms, but I don't think he's as jacked up as my 3-year-old son because he loves to go fishing. And all we have to do is go out to the field and grab a corn stalk and pull it up and we have earthworms and now we can go fishing. But yeah, I do love earthworms. The most visible sign of life in the soil that we can physically see without using a microscope. Yeah, I love sharing my story. I spoke at one of Mitchell's events this last winter, the big soil health event in Cedar Falls, up on stage with 3 other guys that have the same passion as me. We spoke, shared our experiences. I mean, I got an earpiece in my ear. I'm on my phone all day long. I constantly have phone calls from people from not just in eastern Iowa, but nationwide. I mean, I talk to people all over the nation that are doing some cool stuff, and they're calling me with questions, or I'm calling them with questions, or we're running ideas by each other like, hey, this works in your area, maybe we should try it up in this area, or vice versa. And, every farm's different, so not everything that works on my farm is going to work somewhere else, that's 100, 200 miles away, but, hey, we're willing to try it, and do different things. So, yeah, it is a passion of mine and something I love to share.
That's cool that you have this network of other farmers that you can bounce ideas off of. And speaking of networking, when you were at the Iowa Farm Bureau Young Farmer Conference, you said that you had met some people who turned you on to a new opportunity with cover crops.
So yeah, I was at the Iowa Young Farmer Conference 3 years ago, and I happened to meet James Holtz. Him and his friend Bill Frederick had both started Iowa Cover Crop in Jefferson, Iowa. They knew I was doing some seeding with a drone at that time, and I was doing some no-till and cover crop. And so they asked me if I'd consider being a dealer for them. And I says, well, yeah, what's it take? And he stuck his hand out and he said, here you go, you're a dealer. Shook his hand and I was a dealer. That's all it was. So it worked out really good. Figured, hey, I'm already using cover crop seed. I might as well sell it, share my experiences and my knowledge and offer the customers the service and be able to do it. Not just sell the seed, but I'll apply the whole service. And that stuff I can give to the farmer like, here, it's applied, here's the cost, here's the paperwork, here's everything you need to bring to your FSA office or your NRCS office. And then try to educate them after the sale of how are you going to terminate it, how are you going to manage it, what crop are you going to plant into it. That is the whole next step is after we plant it, what are we going to do come next year, and try to put together a program for them so we can set them up for success.
So as you continue to build upon everything that you're doing, that can have quite the learning curve? Is this something that you learned on the fly?
Well, it was my worst subject in school. I hated biology. I never took chemistry class. And the biology class was the class I got the worst grade in throughout high school. And fast forward to the age of 32, 33, and I've learned more about biology and chemistry in the last year and a half, 2 years, than I've learned in my entire life combined. It started with the cover crops and the soil health. It's like, oh yeah, we're making our soil healthy. Hey, that's cool. We got some worms. Well, until you look at the soil under the microscope and actually learn about what's all out there, it's not just soil. It's comprised of a lot of stuff. I mean, you got microbes, you've got fungi, bacteria, you got arthropods, you've got nematodes, you've got all these beneficials out there that are working in conjunction to make the soil function. And we started learning about that. And it's like, wow, it really opened our eyes on what was going on in our fields and how it functions to grow the crop we need. I mean, we dove in with compost extract, making our own on-farm biological. And now we've amped it up this year. We're actually using worm poop, you could call it. It's called vermicompost. And we are screening it, filtering it, liquefying it, running it through a filter again, and we're putting it on with the planter in furrow. We're also doing foliar applications, and it's full of living microbes that help the soil function and help the plant become healthy. And it's just crazy when you look at it under the microscope, what you're all seeing and what's actually in your soil, what's going on there. Really tried to educate ourselves a lot with it, went to a lot of field days, winter events, learning about it, talked to other individuals. There's farmers across the country that are doing this.
Yeah, and even aside from other farmers, you're also involved in a lot of education with local schools and students.
Yeah, so I am involved with a little bit with the Maquoketa Valley FFA, and so they're renting a small field. I believe it's 20 acres, and they plant seed on it, and then they harvest it. So they planted wheat there the previous year, needed a market to go with the wheat to get rid of it, to sell it into. They end up getting rid of the wheat, and they're like, we need to plant something here that we can have a market for that's maybe a little bit better than wheat. And I says, well, tell you what, I said, I got cover crop seed. I said, I'll donate some seed to you guys. So last fall, they seeded the cereal rye. We pulled soil samples. I made fertilizer recommendations to them, just kind of helping coach them along. You have this soil, but what are we going to do with it? What do we got out there? So pull some soil samples. Let's see what we got. Let's make some fertility recommendations. Let's build some soil biology and plant some cereal rye. Now this year, we're going to harvest that in July. I'll buy the seed off of them and clean it, and that'll get sold to customers for cover crop seed.
That's cool that a local school is involved in all of the county conservation efforts. And speaking of donations, as part of this award, you are given money to grant to a local organization of your choice. Can you talk about who you gave that to and why?
Yeah, as a recipient of the award, I have decided to donate that grant money to the Maquoketa Valley FFA, where they are going to use the funds to put in a hydroponic system to grow vegetables for the school. So the students can grow it, and then they can also consume it there. And then when school's not in session, there is a local business in town that they will be bringing that to sell it. So it gives them the experience of not only growing something, but selling it as well. I grow my own food here, and it's just nice being able to see it and grow it yourself, and the students would be able to do the same thing.
Yeah, that'll be so cool for them to go through their lunch line and be like, hey, I grew that. And so I want to switch gears because this is a Farm Bureau Leadership Award. And I want to hear more about your involvement in Farm Bureau, the activities that you've been part of, and just why you became a member, what you get out of it.
Yeah, so I've been on the Farm Bureau for a handful of years. I've served in numerous positions within that board. It's really great to be able to help give back to the community. It feels good to be able to be a part of an organization that has the ability to be able to do that and to get out there and associate with the people. And it's not just people in agriculture, but it's everybody within the community. It's been a great organization. I really enjoy it. One of the first years I was in Farm Bureau where I got to go to Washington, D.C. for the crop report, and where they bring you into the room and they report to you the crops before they get put onto the Board of Trade or whatnot. And that was a really good experience, and it was really awesome to be able to see the involvement the Farm Bureau has. And the best part about that, looking back now, I met Brent Johnson, and I actually went to that with him. And that was long before he was president, I got to meet him, super nice guy, and then now fast forward to now, and he's, at the position he's at now. It's pretty awesome to say, hey, I went down to Washington, D.C. with that guy, and met him. And, I look forward to keep growing with the Farm Bureau and do more activities with them and reach out to more people. And everyone I talk to about it, I express to them, like, hey, you should get involved with this because it really is a great organization.
If you're listening, maybe you're hearing some chickens or some hogs. So can you tell us more about all of the livestock on your farm?
Well, we got one that's down by my feet right now meowing, and that is my son's kitten, Sissy. That is a male. That is a very nice tame kitty.
Looks very nice.
So, yeah, we got some cats running around here. We got some chickens. It's kind of the children's chores. The kids love the chickens. They get the eggs every day and help feed them and stuff. It's fun for them. We do wean to finish pigs for JBS. We've got a handful of feeder cattle out on pasture. We do raise a couple pasture pigs every year. We keep those, we process them and sell some of that locally and then keep some for ourselves. Our cereal rye and our buckwheat was both regenerative verified, and so we actually milled some, and we're selling it as flour. The other day, we made breakfast, and we had rye pancakes. We had sausage from pork that we raised, our pasture pigs, and then we had eggs from our chickens. The only thing we didn't have that we were consuming that wasn't our own was the milk. So, which we should have just went to my wife's parents' farm and grabbed a gallon of milk from their cows because they milk. They're dairy farmers yet. So, should have just got some milk from them and it all would have been locally produced entire meal. It's good to be able to feed your kids that and be like, hey, this whole meal on your plate came from the farm that you live on, all within literally 100 yards. So, pretty neat.
So obviously, we know that farming is hard work, and you've talked about all the different trials and errors of farming and all the things you had to learn. But the other word you keep using is fun. It's fun to me. Farming is fun. Tell us more about that fun aspect that you live every day.
Yes, challenging is definitely part of it because farming is a lot of work and it's 7 days a week. But yes, it is fun. And I try to make it fun. Like even on the bad days, it's like, well, here's the positive side of things. We're always doing something different. Nobody is telling you have to grow just corn and beans. So why not try something else? That's what I did. And it makes it exciting every year because it's a challenge. It's not just, well, we need this much out there to grow the corn and we're done. Now we got a crop we're harvesting in July. Planting green, seeing all the wildlife and stuff out in your field and the butterflies and the birds flying around, the pheasants. That's fun to me, being able to see all that life out there. And planting the different crops, raising numerous different livestocks, starting to mill our own flour and stuff and sell that. It's just something new every year. And then you throw vermicompost in and making your own biological fertilizer. It's like, well, now we threw a whole other thing in there. I have numerous friends and neighbors that literally ask me, so what are you doing new this year? They start taking notice and then they start doing different things too. And it just makes it enjoyable, and my kids see that and they love it too, So yeah, that's what makes it fun.
As you heard, Ryan has a lot going on at his farm, and it's incredible how intentional he is in approaching life above and below the soil surface. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Josh, Matthew, and Ryan this week. And we'd also like to extend a congratulations and a thank you to all the Farm Bureau leaders who've joined us for annual meeting this week. You are the foundation of this influential organization, and we are so proud to work on your behalf. Please join us for our next regularly scheduled Spokesman Speaks podcast on December 18th. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau. And thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.